Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Schmidtless Live. I am your host, Kurt Schmidt. I'm excited to be with you today, president and partner at Foundry. And before I get started, I do have to mention that we are hiring. Yes, hiring. Check out, what a surprise. It's only every show I mention it. So check out foundrymakes.com/careers. We're hiring. It's been a busy year. I'm excited for this Tuesday though, because I've got a good friend of mine, Michael. Michael, how are you today? Thanks for joining me.
Doing great, Kurt. Thank you for having me on. I'm doing just great.
Good. I'm glad. So tell me about where you're at. What's the work you do? You've been in software development for about, I don't know, a couple hundred years, right?
20 years.
Wow.
I build software much like you do. Build custom software on the web and mobile platforms.
And your role is president. What is in your company? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm president of Matrix. We are a 6-person right now company. We are all developers located here in Boise, Idaho. I've been, like I said, been doing it for 20 years. And
that's awesome.
The company size goes up and down depending on what projects we have.
Yep. Boise, my wife is a huge fan. She wants us to retire there, I think.
Okay, well, you and about, I don't know, 50,000 other people every year are flowing into the place.
I know. Well, you got water there. The rest of the West Coast apparently doesn't, so.
Yeah, well, I haven't been paying much attention to the water issues because you're right, we do have water here. So
Yep.
I must not. I didn't realize it was an issue.
Well, there is. That's a whole other show. All right, let's get into our conversation today. So you and I met via Clubhouse, and we've talked about a ton of different subjects there, and I really enjoyed our conversation. So I'm glad that you had a chance to come and join me today, because I really want to talk about this idea of where leadership in engineering is in today's world versus where it's been. So back in the day, we had waterfall was basically the way that we worked, right? We wrote everything down that the software was going to do. We spent all the time figuring out every little possible thing that could happen and what would go. And then we'd get the client to sign it, and then it was immediately out of date. And then we'd go and build the thing, and changes would happen, and we'd be so frustrated because we'd be like, and now we've got this sort of agile world that we're living in. People expect things to be a bit iterative. And I think the role for the senior developer or the senior engineer has changed a lot over the years. Before, it seemed to be that was the person that kind of determined scope and then just kind of led the charge. Now, you're coaching people because you're demoing every couple of weeks, right? You're demoing software. You're dealing with humans, not just software, right? What have you seen in your 20 years? Do you feel like it's changed?
Oh my goodness, it's changed drastically, and I don't think it's done changing because we still run into people constantly who are just still in the waterfall mindset.
Sure.
Without digging in deep on how much your senior developer's role has had to change, because they have largely had to change the way you just described, but they also have had to take on this training role of teaching people how to be more agile and how to avoid things that used to fit into the waterfall scheme.
Yeah, and do you? And again, I don't think most engineers start their career saying, "Boy, I can't wait to lead and guide and grow other people." Do you feel
the word babysit gets thrown around a lot?
Babysit, yeah.
I mean, guide and grow, sure. The same thing ends up happening, right?
Yeah, right. Well, and again, I feel like that's kind of an expectation of a senior role now. I mean, I know some companies have separate tracks, right? Where you've got individual contributor role, and you've got leadership roles. Do you find that? Because again, I don't feel like these people are getting the training in these areas. They're kind of just put into that position.
Yeah, we're smaller, and so we do
Yeah.
have more of a homegrown method of coming up to speed on our agile track, I guess.
Sure.
And in a lot of cases, when someone starts, they're coming into a software role from anywhere, right?
Yep.
They may have been a freelancer for a long time and just had a completely ad hoc methodology, and they may be learning about a more formal agile process for the first time, or perhaps they came from a consulting role where that's all they did was very, very agile. And so, it's across the board. In a small organization like ours, it can be kind of difficult because we don't have as structured of a training
Well, and they wear a
ground.
lot of
But
hats, right? No matter what.
oh my goodness, everyone wears lots of hats,
Yep.
lots of hats.
Well,
But
that's what I
in
found
the
is,
senior role, like you were saying, you do have to be able to train someone else.
yep.
The easy ones to train, I think, are other developers. The more difficult ones to train are the clients, where the clients may have an idea and have no idea what might be the best way to get it done. And so you have to train them at the same time as you're having them maybe trim some of their idea or expand some of their idea in ways that they're not used to or haven't ever had to do before.
Well, and I think that's also I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's also something that I expect from a senior engineer, is being able to be that guide and not just someone who's like, what do you want? Because what I've found is, in both of us work in agencies and have worked in agencies for a long time, but the worst thing is when, the client's asking for things and the engineers just keeps building and keeps building and keeps building, and the client gets a bill and they're like, why does this cost so much? Well, you asked for all these things. Well, I just thought those things were included. That's, and, it takes that experienced architect level person to be able to say no, but, or yes, but, or, it isn't something that's just inherent that you learn out of school.
No, not at all. And the way we used to do it in the waterfall world is all change orders.
Yes.
And so often we get into kind of an in-between stage between Agile and Waterfall, where we're like, oh, well, does a change order fit here? Because we are changing something that wasn't originally part of the plan. So in Agile, we constrain things with budget and timeline, right?
Yep.
And when someone says, well, we really want that, and all of a sudden our timeline's getting messed up, and we push back, or we say, okay, what are we going to get rid of in order to fit that in? And someone says, well, we have to anyway. So
Yep.
yeah, having those conversations, knowing when to have those conversations, that can be really difficult.
Yeah.
And a senior dev is not just someone who's been developing for 8 years. It really is somebody who can lead a team and know how to ask those questions.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about questions. What are some of your go-to questions when out there? Hit a button. Sorry. What are some of your go-to questions when you're interviewing folks, Michael? What are some things that you really want to know when you're bringing someone on in a developer role at your company?
Well, just that thing I just mentioned right there about change
Okay.
orders. I often ask that question. How do you deal with a change order, or how do you deal with a change midway through a project? And I leave it open-ended like that. I don't try and say, what methodology do you use? I leave it open-ended and let people talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because again,
that's actually kind of a leading question.
Yep.
Some people are just like, oh, I'm hoping that all of the specs get fed to me and I don't have to worry about that.
Right.
And then I know where they're on one side, and another person is, well, we don't allow them if
Yep. We
except
say
every
no.
6 months, and I know where they're at there.
Hmm.
But most of the time, it's a much more in-depth conversation that gets started.
Yeah. So if you do have, and maybe this is something more of a personal question for you, Michael, but where do you point these people to in terms of growth in their career? Right. Obviously, you can just work on more things. You can make the internet bigger and make more software. But what are other areas where you would suggest someone who's looking to grow in their leadership skills in engineering or development? Where should they be finding these things? Should they just be going out and reading books? Maybe get a good therapist. Uh,
Well, I think everybody probably needs a good therapist, but only a small percentage actually have them. I'm not one of them, but I probably should as well.
well, that's
Um,
surprise. This is an intervention, Michael. Your team asked me to. No, I'm
I
kidding.
was wondering if they were back there behind the door, or behind the window. They're looking in every once in a while. Actually, it looks like we got a stormtrooper up there looking in. Anyway, well, we internally have just professional development meetings once a week with everybody, and we talk through where they want to go and what they want to get out of their career. And I guess you could say we customize it. We're not quite formal enough to say that we've got a whole bunch of tracks that everyone
Sure.
jumps on. But different people have different needs. Some people are like, hey, I need to hold steady right where I'm at right now. I'm not looking to
Yep.
I need some stability. And other
Yep.
people are, they're jumping in, they're taking, they want to get into some PMI courses and they want to get certified. But wherever everybody's at, we also do a book club, and that's what we call it, although it ends up just being, typically we rotate through a couple of books, like The Lean Startup,
Mm-hmm.
and we just quote that. We just quote that book all the time because even though we're going to be agile, this Lean Startup allows us to talk with our customers
Right.
using terminology that we also give them to help them discuss things in a as agile and lean way as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, that's really our only training that we put everyone through.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds
Is,
like there's
is through that. So
well, and it sounds like what you're saying is you're established, like you understand how to make, how to close brackets and those things, but at the same time, like understanding the business side of the work that they're doing, I think is important, right?
oh, that's another go-to question I always interview with. Is I'm looking for business experience. I don't really consider experience of just programming and just knowing syntax as very good experience. Sure, it's pretty important,
Yep.
but if you haven't been talking with a client or if you haven't been communicating with a team about business concepts, then I think you're really just getting started.
Yeah, because it definitely feels like a curve, right? Where it's like you're trying to get to a comfortable spot with development and programming that you feel like, okay, I can make something work and I can make it work more often than not. And then from there, it becomes more about, now can I help define the work that I'm doing, right? It's not just, like you mentioned, just taking requirements and, just being a ticket pusher, right? Is being someone who's sitting at those meetings or those demos or those sprint meetings and actually contributing, right?
Yeah, well, and that's an important role to have, but typically that'd be more of a junior or a mid-level dev that would do that. But I think it's actually kind of important to have that on a team where it's kind of well-rounded, right? There's kind of some grunt work that's going on.
Yep, always gonna work.
That people can just push through some tickets, push tickets, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the it's really got to be led by somebody who is able to critically think through, how are we going to use this? Do you really want that? How's that going to fit into the whole construct? And of course, are we going to be able to get it done in time? How might we crank it out faster? How can we deliver it faster? That's one of our things is to be delivering as quickly as possible.
Yep.
And so if we can deliver something smaller and sooner, then we do.
Do you feel
getting someone
that
to think through that is important?
Well, do you feel that again, this is just a hypothesis. I don't really have a clear opinion here, but do you feel that because we're delivering so much faster than we used to when it used to be more waterfall, has that impacted the more one-on-one time that we have with folks, or has it increased the amount of attention that we can pay to folks? Where do you feel that transition is in terms of helping people in their career and growing?
I hadn't really thought about that. I think that people end up getting more communication on the team and more communication with whoever the stakeholders are. We really used to only have the seniors communicating with the client periodically, and we've started having more roundtables where everybody is able to, even if they may not be participating, they're able to take part in those communications. Sure. And eventually get to the point where, hey, they are bringing ideas to the table that no one had thought of, and we're talking about it early.
And what do you say? Do you feel? Have you had people either on your team or you've worked with who maybe you feel like have a lot of the, and I'm going to ask this both ways, have a lot of the qualities of a senior person, but just kind of won't adopt them, won't accept them, or vice versa, where maybe they don't have the qualities and they keep pretending that they do. Have you experienced that?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that I don't have anybody on the team anymore.
Yeah.
Like that, but most certainly there are. I've definitely had people who think that they work agile and they can talk it and they have the communication, and then when we get into a project, they deliver in giant batches, if I can call that.
Yep.
And they are really building giant constructs and large deliverables that can't be viewed for much longer. So yeah, absolutely. And I would not say that that's in the I'm going to be showing my age. People will say that to me all the time nowadays, by the way, but when I say that it's typically somebody who's been in development much longer, who has a waterfall background, whereas the newer generation of developers, they kind of come in with an understanding.
Yep. That's a comfortability
that's what's
factor.
Expected for sure. And I'm always surprised by it because it seems like as a senior dev, someone who's been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years, you should really see the value of getting something out there quickly so you can get feedback right away. Yep. And you can deliver what they want. But some people just don't want that. They really want to hold on to it until it's perfect.
Well, like you said, it's fun and interesting to talk about, but then there's a comfortability factor, right? Like I've delivered this way for years and years and years, and now I need to change that. If you remember back with extreme programming and these types of concepts, that it was really hard to get people out of their comfort zone because they would work so long and so hard to build a certain way of where they felt they were delivering the most value. And then we have asked them to change it. And even some of them, like you said, rallied for those changes to be made. But then, when you're there by yourself with your headphones on, that's when the demons come, right? And tell you like, this is the way to do it. So you'll be successful, and where I've found, back to your point, is that people with an open and curious mind, right? I mean, we always joked about putting on our job descriptions, must have at least 3 years of Stack Overflow experience, because I didn't want people that assumed they knew everything, right? Is that because I'd worked with those people in the past. I'd worked with developers who were like, you know what, I could probably code this library as fast as I could use it. And I'm like, don't do that. Use the library. don't start from, what are you doing? And again, it was this weird flex, of trying to show value. And I think that comes down to good management. And that's where, again, my long rant is that if you don't have those senior people that have been there and done that, and have, honestly, they're not because they're super smart, but they've made those mistakes you're going to already, and there to help guide you, and if you're not willing to listen to them, I mean, I don't know where you think your career is going.
Well, I think the biggest issue is that it's not actually always intuitive. It's not something that's built in, right?
Right.
If our meetings, our daily meetings, were not directed, people would spend most of their time describing what they did instead of describing the value of what they did was. And so we have this discussion every once in a while. It comes up where we talk about how do we frame our communication in meetings with to describe the value we brought, as opposed to the process of bringing that value, right? Instead of saying, hey, I did coding for 8 hours, you say, hey, I completed this deliverable that you can look at and see has, does this thing. That's kind of vague there, but.
No, I get it. But again, it comes back to that, being able to be open to be taught, right? Because you get hired, and this happens in tons of different roles. It's not just engineering, but you get hired and you want to make a good show. Like, hey, you made a good choice by hiring me. Let me show you how great I am. And if you're in the first 90 days and you're in there asking questions of all these senior developers, like, hey, where do you store these files or whatever, like it's not as intuitive to feel comfortable doing that. And so that's why I see in some of these organizations, it takes months to a year for somebody to ramp up, not because they're a bad programmer, but maybe there's not a great onboarding. Maybe there's not a great landing zone for them where you, person like yourself, Michael, a leader, is creating that purposeful safe space for them to come in and, make mistakes. I try to tell our employees, like, in your first year, if you don't make a mistake, I'm going to fire you.
Well, we are not of the size that we can handle a 1-year investigation period,
Sure.
And so we have to have an onboarding process that allows us both to, well, make a mistake a lot quicker than 1 year out, but we also make sure we have a culture where that's acceptable, and everybody is always describing, again, in daily meetings, just what they did or didn't do, or made a mistake with, or how we learned, because it has to be, you say, a safe space, but it just has to be an accepting, forward-thinking, forward-moving group where everybody's in it together.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you do that, Michael. What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? You had mentioned, those one-on-one meetings each week where you're talking over not just projects, but their goals and their hopes and dreams and all that. What other things have worked for you? What's not worked for you? What advice would you give other senior leaders in engineering, things to look for?
Well, and those one-on-one meetings are only personal development, career. The projects and everything, we're doing that as a group, and daily and weekly as well. But things I've seen work, I think it's a moving target. So I don't know that there's any one that I know will always work, but having a conversation as a group about that very topic to ask what makes you more comfortable to describe when you've made a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
what kinds of mistakes have people made that they recovered from. We've got a story that I don't tell, but someone else in the organization, every time someone new comes on, they make sure they tell them early, hey, I know you're pretty worried about making an error here. Let me tell you about the time when I dropped a database. And
Just fell out of his
he's
hands.
just like one of the
oh no, database.
he's one of the first person one of the first people to describe it, maybe because he doesn't want people to find out about it later. But he
Well, I think that's why
he just describes it, and it makes a safe space so that other people are like, okay, you got to try stuff. You can't just be so afraid of it that you can't learn or move forward.
You got to push it. But yeah, then you get, I mean, that's why it's so funny. Like when, like HBO just had that mistake where a test email went out to, you know, millions of customers or whatever. And it just became this huge meme all over the place, right? Because a lot of these mistakes don't make it into production as quickly as things like that, especially at that scale. But every single person who's watching this, who's, you know, who I've had on the, you know, we've all been there. We've all shipped something to production that probably shouldn't have gone there. And again, but it's intimidating when I'm a new person coming into a place and I see Michael and he's this, developer that's been doing this a long time. He probably has forgotten more than I'll ever know and blah, blah, blah. But I think to your point, sharing those experiences and being like, oh yeah, I've tested in production plenty of times.
Yeah, I definitely testing in production has happened. I heard something in a meeting or just in a stand-up today where someone said that they weren't able to test this in development, and so we're going to do a quick push, and I'm going to test it in production. I heard that one today, and I said, yeah, it definitely happens, and sometimes there are situations when you're, well, what's the quicker way to do it? Do we spend 3 or 4 days in order to create a development environment, or do you go ahead and do that because it's, you know, super low risk? And voicing that, sharing that with everybody, letting other people see it. I guess you might say be vulnerable.
Sure.
In a way. It sounds a little bit squishy, but that's really what it is.
Yeah,
you know,
I think it's important that showing that vulnerability, but also I think what I also hear you saying in those team stand-ups, what I've found is great is just building a culture of accountability too. Is if you're saying in front of all these other, maybe not in front of the boss who you're like, well, whatever, the guy signs my paychecks or she signs my paychecks or, you know, whatever the case may be. But I don't want to look like a jackass to my peers. So if I make a promise in front of the group, that accountability helps push me along. And I've found that to also be a powerful tool in that building growth in with people, because honestly, like, you know, I wasn't super smart when I started as a developer and a designer way back a long time ago. And most of the time I got good at what I was doing because I would put my foot in my mouth. I would say like, oh yeah, I can get that done. Yeah, I get it done by tomorrow. And then it'd be like 2 a.m. and I'd be like,
committing to something in a group it's very powerful.
Yeah.
And also describing when you did something wrong or when you made a mistake and discovering what you learned from it, sharing that with other people, both of those they're very powerful, and they allow for a lot of transparency, and juniors can learn and come up so much faster in that environment. Just, it's incredible.
Yeah.
You actually asked,
go ahead.
Earlier you asked about, are there any developers that have that are senior that don't really have those skills? Well, the same as the other way around. Sometimes you run into juniors and you look at them and say, wow, you have you really have a knack for some of the things that it sometimes takes a long time to grow. But having an open, transparent environment like that allows you to discover that. Whereas if you didn't, it would be a lot harder to figure out who's where in different places. So anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen it at other agencies I've worked at where you might bring on a junior person and, you know, it's almost like the new guy at the front lines. Like nobody wants to learn their names because they're like, oh, they're gonna be dead in a week. You know, I don't want to touch them. I don't want to talk to them. You know, but that's where I find it that, you know, these more senior developers, some developer along the way took you under their wing or pushed you or gave you some advice or helped you along. And maybe it wasn't one person, maybe it was a dozen people. But I look at that when I see those junior people coming on is that they're going to be as good, you know, yeah, they have everybody has a ceiling about how good they can get on their own. And then it takes a village, it takes a group, it takes the team to help get them to the next level. And I think if people understand their role and the accountability that comes along with that, when you are bringing on more junior people, I've seen it. And I think, you know, at our company Foundry, it's fantastic. I mean, I see people just checking in with new people, not because they're told to, just because they just want to make sure they're okay because they were new at our company too, you know, and it isn't something where I have to, as the president, come in and be like, "Oh, you make sure you're reaching out to people and telling them things." You know, it's kind of built into the culture, and I think that's building a culture that is, you know, helps care and feed for its own. I mean, I think is huge, but yeah, if you build a team where it's kind of like you're only celebrating wins and punishing failure, yeah, guess what people are going to talk about and where they're going to hide.
Yeah, well, kudos to you for building that culture. It's not easy
No.
at all.
Nope.
When we first started, the path was just we hire you as a junior, a mid, or a senior. And the goal is to start producing and get, start building profit as soon as possible. And over time, I learned that it's just so much better, and everybody feels better, and they stick with the company longer and love it when they both have other people following up with them, or they follow up with other people. Just having a kind of a transparent, you know, just something as simple as having a chat where anybody could say anything at any time, not just, you know, project only chats.
For sure.
Back when Slack came out and everybody was able to communicate all the time, that was probably the turning point, I think, when it turned into a culture where everybody can contribute.
Yeah.
And can hear from anybody at any time. I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of things involved, but it seemed like that was the biggest thing I could point out.
It was a big cultural shift. I mean, we had chat rooms at old agencies years before chat, but for some reason, Slack, I don't know, just the way that it presented itself seemed much more friendly in a way than these other more, you know, terminal looking chats.
Oh yeah, we were geeking out on IRC channels.
Yeah, exactly. IRC,
there was nothing. Somehow that gave permission. We've got a company channel named Water Cooler. Oh, okay. Now we can talk about that. That's right. Same, different medium, same exact conversation could have been happening.
Yeah. All right, Michael. So the last question I have for you is talking about titles. Now, this can be a hot button issue in a lot of companies. You know, some larger companies do like developer 1, 2, 3. Some places are very tenure based, right? Where at a certain, you know, at 3 years you become a developer 2 or whatever the case may be. I know other places that are much more rigid where it's like, well, if you want to be a developer, senior developer, you got to take the senior developer test or things like that. What is your take on titles? How important are they in your opinion? Do they matter and why?
In my organization, they do not matter. everyone has internally a title developer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes externally, people will want to have software architect
Yeah, sure.
or senior developer, and we've always just been okay with okay, that's fine. Let's just keep it consistent so that it doesn't look like
Mm-hmm.
your title's changing all the time. But the I wish I had a more formal answer for you, but the real reason that we just all go with developers is because what we can contribute that day or that month or that year is based on what we're contributing, not some title.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody, I don't, nobody automatically gets tenure. It's always proven, myself included.
That's
Although
fair.
I do have title of president, so.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
but people got to know where the buck stops, right?
I suppose, yeah, exactly. And I mean, maybe a conversation for another time, but have a team in India that is so focused on titles they cannot help it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Um,
a culture thing, right?
oh, and it's not good. I have a person who's an absolute. He's a genius. He is a communicator, and he's only been developing for about 9 months, but
Mm.
he is brilliant. And everybody else on the team says, no, we can't pay him that. We cannot pay him that. It is incorrect. No one will work in a company that does something like that.
Mm.
And I can't understand it because that's not at all how we work within our
Yeah.
company here. But and I've also had people who were hired that said, or that I've interviewed, maybe hired, that were very, very stuck on titles, and they were only interviewing if they could write their own title, and their title was going to be this because they're on a path and they're on a ladder, and the title matters to them.
Yeah.
So all of those are very anecdotal. I don't know that
No,
that's
this
a
is
very
great.
good industry analysis, but it is. Some people it's very important to, but not here. It's
Yeah.
all about deliverables.
Yeah, and that's what I found with other folks too, is that if title is very important to you, if for some reason, and again, I think it comes back to a culture thing, right? Depending on how you grew up, what sort of jobs your parents had, even, or like you said, which part of the world you live in. These things take on different meanings, and so by having, there's plenty of large organizations that will give you all the titles that you want. But again, both you and I run smaller agencies, and we're not as focused on title as we are on the service that we're providing or the impact that we're trying to make with our job. Whereas in other places, your title kind of leads. It's your calling card that shows this is the impact I have before I even open my mouth. Is that so? Who's
Yeah.
walking into this room or into this meeting.
Yeah, typically when I see titles on a resume or something that I'm hiring that has a 1, 2, or 3,
Yeah.
they're from some level of enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
organization, or state where perhaps they don't have the ability to pay as much attention to what's being delivered, and so they just need to throw everybody into a category and a pay rate or a title.
Yeah.
But I haven't ever quite figured out, because somebody who's a developer 3, I couldn't tell you whether or not they have the system architect or the communication piece or anything.
They can make faster
It almost
semicolons
masks
than a
it.
junior person.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. Well, Michael, thank you so much. I always enjoy our conversations. I really
Me as
appreciate you
well,
taking
Kurt.
the time today. So if I want to know more about you and the company you're at, where do I go? Where do I find that information?
Yeah, well, Matraex.com. Company name is Matraex, Matraex. .com. You can go out there, take a look. If you've got a project or something, some sort of software that you've been thinking about, look us up, and we'll see what we can do.
I love it. Well, Michael, again, thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah, I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Me as well, Kurt. Thank you.
All right. All right, everyone. Just so we are clear, hiring, Foundry. Yes, there it is. We're hiring. We're a lot of hiring. So this week, there's a couple more. There's one more live show on Thursday, which I definitely suggest that you tune in for. There's going to be even more live shows coming up. And, I've been working on the Twitter stuff more. So, if you want to follow me, you can look me up there, either Schmidtlist or KRTS, which is my Twitter handle. And I've been, if you check out Schmidtlist on TikTok, I've been experimenting there. It's been super fun. And I'm going to do a little Ask Me Anything live show here soon, where if people have some interest on like how things happen behind the scenes here and all the different things that are going on, I'm going to be sharing that information. So I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day today. I appreciate you, and we will see you next time.